All right. So we're talking about the part of fortune today, and um, I want to open this with a story about my tattoo. Christopher Warnock, you all are aware of Christopher Warnock. So Christopher Warnock has been doing his thing for about 25 years now, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe yeah, about 25 years. And oh, if you're not, love this site so much. Right. Okay, great. All right. So Christopher Warnock has been the Renaissance astrology site. I first kind of became aware of it maybe in 2001, 2000. And he really is kind of the pioneer that brought back the astrological magic thing, which of course we've all been so interested in, and we did a little thing on, and not even anywhere near what he does. But he had his own Yahoo group. And his Yahoo group was all about, it was called Spiritus Mundi or Anima Mundi, and it was all about doing elections for talismans. And so what he would do is he would have an election that he would bring forward, and sometimes he would share some of the pictures that he had made, you know, that he's made with us. This is when he was really starting to first make them. I think, so I remember when the artist was kind of creating them, and he said, okay, I'm going to make this one free for the group and that kind of thing. But then also, if you had an election, he would fine tune it for you. So if you put an election forward and say, I'm going to make a talisman for this, he would say, oh, hey, well, think about this. So around that time, I decided that I was going to get a talisman for Mercury. Mercury is on my ascendant, as you all probably know. Sagittarius is rising. Mercury is at 21 degrees of Sagittarius. But Mercury is also the ruler of the part of fortune. Now, this is before I really got into, this is while I was into what traditional astrology, but it's before I really kind of got into it. Got into understanding the part of fortune, mind you. So I put forward this election, and he said, hey, why don't you do this? And so I did. So here's an amazing story about astrological magic. So I had this friend named Michelle, and she had this 3-year-old son named Tucker. And Michelle and Tucker and I went out for Thai food at my favorite place. And while we're waiting for our order, this, I lived in San Francisco back then. It was, it was freaks of all kinds. It was fabulous. And so in walks this guy that's completely tattooed, like covered, no, not his face, but covered, all over with tattoos. And he looks familiar. That's the weirdest part. I'm like, why do I know that guy? I'm like, what? I don't think I've ever seen him before, but I really feel like I know him. So we get our food, we're eating, and Tucker finishes, and he's in his little high chair or whatever. He gets out of his high chair, he grabs some food, he walks over to this guy's table, and he starts throwing food at him. Oh, yeah, I'll show the, maybe I'll put the camera on my tattoo or whatever. But yeah, actually, it's one of the, it's a talisman. It's one of the pentacles of Solomon for Mercury. So he starts throwing food at this guy. And I'm like, oh my God. So I get up, I'm like, oh, Tucker, hey, come back, and I'm like, look, I'm so sorry. I said, I'm so sorry for this, whatever. I said, but you know what? You look really familiar. And he goes, you do too. And I'm like, well, I'm a musician. What do you do? And he goes, I'm a tattoo artist. And I'm like, oh, ho, ho. So what does Mercury rule? Mercury rules children and the young and tricks. And playing tricks and going off and playing tricks. And remember, like the first thing Mercury does when he's born, Hermes does when he's born, is he goes and steals one of Apollo's cows. So sure enough, the babe shall lead them, right? The babe led me right to this tattoo artist who ended up doing it exactly the way I wanted it, exactly the time with the ceremony I wanted to, etc. After that, I became really interested in the part of fortune and got into valence, etc. So now we actually come to the material that we're using. So I got really interested in the part of fortune a few years after this, maybe I think while I was living in Thailand, so between 2003 and 2005, and especially in Vedic valence and using the part of fortune as an ascendant. And we're going to talk about that today. But first of all, what I wanted to kind of get into is how it was seen, how the part of fortune itself was seen. So first of all, as you can see, it says Vedic valence 2nd century AD. And he here makes reference to a king this king his name is Nechepso, and he had this priest named Pedosiris. These guys are Egyptians from an earlier time. It might be from a BC time, it might be from the century before, but either way, the part of fortune at this time was called the lot. As you can see, moving on to the lot of fortune, these were called lots. Now let's talk about this term lot for just 1 second, because essentially when we think of a lot, we think of an empty area that you might build something on, right? You can rent this lot, you can buy this lot of, it's as a plot or a lot, so plot and lot, right? So, but there's also a lot in life. So a lot being not the word I keep thinking of is assortment, but that's not the correct, an allotment, that's the word I'm looking for. There is an allotment that is given. And so these fortunes, these lots represent mathematical allotments between significators. Okay, so because the way to make a lot is to find the distance between two significators, two planetary significators that represent kind of the same thing. Now, one of the best examples of it is the lot of faith. The lot of faith is the distance between Moon and Mercury by day and Mercury to Moon by night. So that we already know that Mercury and Moon are significators for soul, for the soul in the natal chart. So the significator for the lot of faith involves the two significators for soul. That's how lots are created. So ultimately, we're coming from a time period where there was not really, the idea of free will was not necessarily an important or even a nascent concept. It might have been used or cogitated over during this period, but ultimately people are not necessarily thinking about fortune as far as how we make fortune happen. They were often thinking of fortune of how it is allotted, what kind of or how much or what type is allotted to us. So that's where this term lot of fortune, our lot in life, our allotment, right? So just wanted to kind of bring a little bit of etymology around this term so that we get an understanding of, first of all, how the ancient mind was kind of, or how the ancient seers, or not really seers or philosophers, were kind of looking at this. So I am moving on to the lot of fortune, the most influential and most potent place. Now, one of the reasons it's one of the most influential and potent places is because essentially the lot of fortune is analogous to a Sanskrit term called titi. And titi is the measure of the lunar day. It's basically how many lunar days there are away from either the conjunction, right, or which would be the new moon, or the prevention, which would be the full moon. And so essentially every day there's a different relationship. Every minute, really, every hour, there's a different relationship between the sun and the moon because she's so fast. And so this represents the relationship between the sun and the moon, the relationship between the sun and the moon that changes all the time, that's in a constantly changing, a dynamic equipoise. And this dynamic equipoise is really analogous to the whole Shiva Shakti aspect of the ancient, of kind of the ancient Hindu and Vedic understanding, right? So it's how Shakti acts on Shiva, that through Shanti's action on Shiva, which is just matter in potentiality, that creation happens. And so this same thing, this is kind of why the sun and the moon are considered luminaries and not planets. They are the lights that can always be seen. They follow us all the time. If you've ever been walking and noticed that the sun follows you wherever you go, the moon follows you wherever you go, if it's out, right? So they're not things that can be, unless you're inside, they're not things that can be avoided. And they represent the most potent energies because they are what create generation and growth by day or by night. So, just as the king is mystically revealed in the beginning of his 13th book, next in order, it will be necessary to count accurately the distance from the sun to the moon, then measure off in the opposite direction an equal distance, which star is its ruler, inspect the resulting place, which star is its ruler, and which star or stars are at this point, and all the squares or trine asterisms of this place. You understand what he's saying there? He's saying, are there any planets on the part of fortune? And then what planets might be in the angles to the part of fortune? All the squares or trine, which planets might be in 5 or 9 from the part of fortune of this place. Okay, so that's how they were looking at it. They aren't just looking at it from, oh, it's, you know, this point in the chart. They're looking at it from, hey, oh, is there a planet on it? Oh, what planets are in angles from it? What planets are in trines from it? Not even just, are there any planets aspecting it? From this study, combination of the places make a clear determination of the native's affairs. In his book, The Terms, Pedicyrus explains this place in the same way. Others treat this subject in other ways, which we will publish, blah, blah. Okay, the lot itself will be equivalent to the ascendant and will mean life. The 10th place from it will be equivalent to the MC and will mean rank. The 7th will be the descendant, the 4th DIC. Okay, so all of a sudden we've got a really strong understanding that, oh, wait a second, the lot itself can be used as an alternate ascendant. I call it the alternate east, or your other east. And so as a result, the 10th from it can be seen in the same way, right? We look at the 10th house to look at rank and to look at career and / rank and how high we will go. So those of you who've been with me for a while, and I've talked about using the part of fortune as an ascendant to judge for fame, this is what I'm talking about. It's not just the part of fortune that we look for, but this is how it's done. This is the beginning of how it's done. And and so this is what I discovered. So as I started reading this, and I was like, wait a minute, he's using this as an ascendant, and he's saying that if this is there and that's here, then wait a minute. So I started doing it. I started on the back of the chart. This is when you had good old paper charts. On the back of the chart, I started doing the Greek style square chart and started looking in to see, oh shit. And sure enough, you could almost always, with a certain, I think I had 10 rules. I've written actually a book on it, but there were 10 rules that are about, it's called basically the 5 pillars, and there are 5 lots, the kind of combination of them, which you can, which if they're in certain important places, you can find fame. But here we can see the beginning of this, that the lot itself is not just an important place in the chart like an asteroid. It can actually be used as an ascendant. Some astrologers have mystically hypothesized that the astronomical ascendant and the point square with it are the cosmic angles, while the lot and the point square with it are the natal angles. And they have revealed this in their treatises as follows. That's interesting, wouldn't you say? That's interesting. So that if the ascendant, the radical ascendant and the squares to it are the cosmic angles, but the lot and the point square with it are the natal angles. That means they're more specific to the self. So that's something we might want to be looking for. At this point, you all know every time I look at a chart, I say, oh, where's the part of fortune, right? Every single time. You've never seen me look at a chart and not say that. Where's the part of fortune? Oh, and look at how it's blah, blah, blah with the part of fortune. I'm always doing that. I almost never am doing this, however, which it is something I do. When assigning the influence of the lot among all the multifarious configurations of the angles, neither the tropic nor the solid nor the bicorporeal signs will have the same overall effect. So he's basically saying either the movable or the fixed or the bicorporeal signs will have different effects on angles, which of course we know, or on different houses, which of course we know. It is therefore necessary to examine the aspects or the conjunction of the stars relative to the lot, of course, For example, a beneficent conjunction or an aspect with the lot will be a sign of good and a giver of property. A destructive star will be responsible for loss of goods and sickness of the body. So we're not just talking about rank. We're not just talking about how you'll be in world.
Garth, when they say stars, I'm sorry for the interruption and for the dumb question, but we're talking wandering stars, i.e. planets, right? We're not looking at fixed stars.
Fantastic question. Absolutely. Planet. Absolutely. Thank you for making that distinction. That's absolutely what's going on here. Okay, so here once again with Valens, I just thought I would just kind of once again show you how important we should be looking at the part of fortune at all times. For reasons mentioned above, the lot of fortune and daemon. Now the part of daemon, I just learned, okay, so I just realized that in Abu Mashar, which we're going to look at after this, Abu Mashar also has almost the entire set of lots that Bonatti has. I know Layla, I gave her the book about the lots. If you're interested in that book that Robert Zoller wrote, let me know and I'll send you the link to it. And that there's a list that's almost as long. He got that list from Abu Mashar, and then there are some that are added. So we're going to kind of look at how Abu Mashar was looking at it. But so a lot of daemon is the part of spirit, right? Daemon is spirit, or so just that obviously. So a lot of fortune and daemon have great influence on undertakings and their outcomes. The former gives information about matters concerning the body. Once again, there it is, and concerning the work of hands. So it's a combination. It's not just how well we'll do in life, it's also what's going on with our body. And we're going to talk about the lot of fortune in respect to the Hyleg and Hylegical places and later on. Daemon and his ruler give information about the spiritual intellectual matters. Now, so if you haven't already listened to the traditional astrology, there's two traditional astrology ones you're going to want to listen to in regards to the lot. Obviously, there's the ecosystem of Arabian parts, right, or Egyptian lots. And then there is money, substance, and the part of fortune, where we go into how to look at the actual ruler of substance. And we're not going to go into that specifically, although we're going to look at a piece of it as we move on. But then the third thing is I talk a lot about the part of spirit in the video on the 9th house and spirituality and religion. So if you're interested in getting a little bit more information on those, you can go to the YouTube channel and check out those videos. So giving and receiving intellectual matters and necessary to examine the places and the signs in which their house rulers are located and to correlate their natures in order to learn the type of activity and fortune and quality of the activity. And look, it is best to find the ruler of the spirit at the lot of fortune or at its 10th place. You would be shocked at how many famous people have the planet that rules the lot of spirit 10 houses away from the lot of fortune. Many people. It's kind of how I started going down the rabbit hole. So keep remembering that, like the sun and the moon are luminaries, are the luminaries, and everybody else kind of serves them. They're the royalty, and all of the other planets are their servants, right? Jupiter is the minister. Mars is the warlord or the general. Venus is the lady in waiting. Mercury is the page, right? So Saturn is the old sage or whatever, or the beggar, right? So they all serve the lights. In the same way, the lot of fortune and the lot of spirit or daemon, and it was also called the lot of absence, which I love, or the lot of the hidden. So in the same way, those two lots eclipse and are preeminent over all of the others. All right. So then in this particular section, when he talks about nativities that are illustrious and distinguished, he says that it kind of will show up more. But really, it shows up in everybody's chart. You can just see it more in maybe a more interesting or overt way. If it is in the proper place or another angle, the nativities will be as distinguished and vigorous as they can be under the circumstances. If it is, and what he really meant by under the circumstances was according to the class that they, or the caste that they were born in, right? So there are people that are like a king. You think about somebody like Frederick Douglass in the United States, who was born a slave, but became this really, statesman of sorts, but at the same time was never able to overcome segregation, So he got huge, he got this huge rise in his station, but from within his station, was able to, and so this was a very important kind of a concept in this period, was that fortunes can be within one's stations, that fortunes can be within flux. If it is turned away from its proper place, it turned away means if it's in a cadent house, just precedes an angle or has malefics in aspect, it indicates exile and distress abroad, right? The 12th house was considered, once again, the 12th house was considered exile. If you weren't living at home, it was considered malefic. If it is in conjunction with a benefic or has benefics in aspect, the native will live abroad for a long time, having a varied and fluctuating livelihood. Okay, so now we come to Abu Mashar. And the first section is how to find it. No, maybe it isn't. And the proper quality of the signification signify the soul and its fortune and its strength. And it signifies life and bodies and assets and success and fortune. Okay, so now here we start bringing it. So can we see how it looks like within the period, within the time period, this 800 years or 700 years, right? So, or 600 years. 2nd century to the 9th century, the 700 years, it looks like the idea of the part of fortune or how we're using it has maybe become a little bit less global, a little bit less universal, and it's becoming more specific, right? So now that we come into the medieval era, we're now starting to kind of focus on, hey, it's still soul and all of those other things, but any kind of heathenism, I think we were talking about this, or no, I was talking about it with the Vedic astrologers, about how basically the Islamic astrologers needed to differentiate astrology from Vedic astrology and take it away from the infidel influence, and to take it away from these infidel pagan influences and to turn it into a natural science. And so as a result, that means maybe you might not want to use the part of fortune as an ascendant. You see it less. You certainly don't see them talk about it at all. Whereas in we were just in Valence, and absolutely he's saying, hey, look at the angles to it as well. So let's see if any of that comes up. And if it signifies life and bodies and assets and success and fortune, which is pretty much what Valens was saying. Also enrichment and poverty, gold and silver, also the ease and severity of goods of exchange, so buying and selling, also praise and good reputation. So once again, so it feels like the lot of fortune is a combination of the 1st house and the 10th house. And the lot of fortune is also kind of a key to our public nature and the loftiness of the native and of his kingdom and position of first place. And it signifies riches and honor, also loftiness and good and evil, present and absent, also appearing and hidden. It also signifies intention and the beginning of works and matters. And here's kind of what I was saying. And this lot is put before all the lots in the way that the sun is put before the other planets through his gleaming, and it is more sublime and valuable than all the lots. And as among the planets of the circle, it is not more gleaming, nor more beautiful than them, nor more notable, and it has its own being individually apart from the rest of the stars. So here, it looks like instead of saying, hey, it's also an ascendant and you should be looking at the angles to it, it's saying, hey, this is a singular point that has more significance than almost any other point in the chart. And you should be looking at it, right? It's not saying to reconstruct another chart, but it is saying, hey, this is important. So, likewise, if they were in a good condition or place and they signified good fortune individually, such as rulership and power and assets, so will he be famous and renowned, precious and dear. And they do not use it except for those who individually exceed the being of the rest of their own being. That's kind of so what he meant by that is they don't often use it except for those who are famous. And it is they for whom the luminaries and the lot of fortune is in the optimal and praiseworthy places in their nativities. Right, so they were looking for those are the most powerful. So they're looking for, and even remember when we were looking at profession, Bonatti is all about, is the sun in the 10th house? When it's how high things will go. Right? So when we're looking for profession itself, then it's what planets are in the angle. When we're talking about how high somebody is going to go, is the sun by day in the 10th house or 11th? Is the moon by day in the 10th house or 11th? Right? So same kind of logic is following. So here we are with Guido Bonatti, and remember that Bonatti is essentially like an almanac of the Arabs. Right? He almost always is saying, and so says this, and so says that. And so we can, as we look here, part signifies life. The body also, so this is what, 400 years later. And it's soul, strength and fortune and substance and success. Everything that we just saw. Also riches and poverty, even gold and silver, the severity and ease. Oh, Gwen, not necessarily stock, but investment in gold, because Jupiter's in Leo. Of things bought in the marketplace, even praise and good reputation, and honors and loftiness, good and bad, right? So we pretty much sealed what the significations are. I just wanted to kind of show what the trajectory was over how long? 1,200 years or 1,100 years, starting with the 2nd century, coming to the 13th century. Pretty much the significations are the same. It's the usages which have changed. It's called the ascendant of the moon. If this part of the luminaries were well disposed, and nativities are revolutions. Revolutions, that's a solar return or a revolution of the year, right? A mundane chart. There will be good in notable ways. And it is called the part of the moon. It is the ascendant of the moon and signifies good fortune. It's also in questions or horary, and also elections. I thought this was kind of important. Now here we start to come into this idea of the part of fortune and substance. This is from Bonatti. All of this stuff right here is from Bonatti. And this is from Bonatti on nativities, his chapter on the 2nd house. And his chapter on the 2nd house basically is where he decides to show us how to find the significator for substance. And I'm going to actually put into the chat in a second, in a few minutes, and remind me if I don't do it in the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I'm going to put a document into the chat that has the procedure for that. However, also the video from the traditional astrology course of, what was it? Substance, money, substance, and the part of fortune. We go through that in detail there. But this is the beginning of that, the very beginning of that section, which what he says is if you're going to erect a figure and figure out what someone's going on with someone's prosperity of substance, you're going to look at the part of fortune, for it is preferred to the part of substance. So the part of substance is a 2nd house, part, and because the part of fortune signifies the native substance, prosperity, and status, and his whole condition. There's this connection with the body again. Indeed, the part of substance is attributed to riches alone. So as we come into the medieval era, right, we come into this era where we start looking at something called the Hyleg to figure out whether or not a child is going to survive birth. So there were 4 different differentia of charts on the birth of a child that showed whether or not the child would actually survive. And in order for the child to be able to survive, that 4th differentia usually meant that the child had something called a Hyleg. Now, we're not going to go into how to find the Hyleg here because it's not really that important for this particular discussion. It is part 1 of the 8th house section of the traditional astrology course, And so you can use that. Now that one, unfortunately, we had problems with the screen, and so you might need the documents or the stuff that I use for it. But we go into exactly how to find the Hyleg, and we look at Hylegs in charts, etc.
Can you define Hyleg real quick?
I'm about to do that. So the Hyleg is essentially the source of life in the chart. It's basically the source of life, and you know, I've made allusions to primary directions. So what would happen is they would look at a chart. The first thing that an astrologer would do is see, okay, is this person going to survive birth? Then they would, once they found the Hyleg, which is the source of life in the chart, then they would start to direct the Hyleg to see what would happen to the person. There were different things that they could direct to find the accidents to the person's body or to whatever, and especially for a person's death, right? Because since the Hyleg is basically the life source or the life quotient, let's put it that way. Oh, this is okay. Layla Kabiri says it's from the Middle Persian word hilach, meaning nativity, which is interesting because there's another usage, a Greek word, which is hule, which represents basically the same as what prakriti means in Sanskrit, which is matter in potential, which has not yet been turned into form, and something else creates form of it, out of it, which is called eidos. So there's this concept of hule. The hule, which is the source of life, is the Hyleg, and then the eidos, which tells us exactly how long or what form that life would have, is something called the alkokaden. And the alkokaden shows you how long that life would be. And so Hyleg and alkokaden are essentially the tools to figure out how much life force the person had, and as a result, how long they will live. The reason I bring this up is because all of the Hylegical places, now Christopher came in and said, hey, what does that mean? But if we look at what the Hylegical places are, it becomes obvious, because the 5 places that we look at to find the Hyleg are the sun, the moon, the ascendant, the part of fortune, and the previous conjunction or prevention. What do they all have in common? That's a question for you all. What do they all have in common? Someone? Anyone? Nothing. No one? Light. Light is life, right? So the sun is light. The moon is a light. The ascendant is where the sun rises over the horizon. The ascendant is the horizon, which brings things into visibility and light. The part of fortune is the distance between the lights. The previous conjunction or prevention is the new moon or full moon, which is the relationship between the lights. Light is life. Life is light. And so that's how the quotient of life was basically measured, was through the lights, through how much light there is in the chart, or how prominent, rather, the light would be. So I'm just bringing it up because, once again, remember we were just talking about how the part of fortune is the main representative of the current relationship between the moon and the sun at the time of birth, in the same way that the Tithi is in the Panchanga in Vedic astrology. So this is what's so important about the part of fortune. This is what's so primary, what makes it so primary. Venus isn't here, Mercury isn't here, Jupiter isn't here. Only the stuff that has to do with light and the lights itself, right? The ascendant is the horizon. It's the ascendant because the zodiac sign goes over the horizon and becomes visible at the moment of our birth. The zodiac sign then becomes the sun. the ascendant is east, right? So the ascendant is the east, where the sun rises, or so does our zodiac sign, which then becomes our personal sun. This is why the sun isn't important in traditional astrology, or isn't as important. We can see it is very important, but it's not that important it's not as important for delineation as the moon is. And that's of course because she's the closest to the earth, and she's the fastest, and she's the transmitter between the celestial realm and the other realm. Okay, so that is the presentation part. I want to just look at one other thing, and this is where I want you to be looking at your own chart. So what I want you to do right now is look at your chart and figure out where your two things, where your part of fortune is and the planet that rules it. Because if you remember, I was talking about, you can put it in the chat. Yeah, put it in the chat, that's best. Because, so if you remember, I was talking about how there's this whole huge chapter on the second house in Bonatti. Interestingly enough, remember, think of all of the different things that the part of fortune is supposed to encompass. Our body and our body and well-being, our wealth or poverty, our rank in life, right? But the only place that we see the part of fortune really gone into in detail is the second house. Like we see it in the beginning when we look at, you know, how to find the Hyleg, but then we're not going into the part of fortune itself. But where we get the most information about the part of fortune in this entire book is not the 10th house, is not the first house chapter, it's the second house chapter. So for what reason the native is going to acquire money? So this is towards the very end. And he's already looked at how the person is going, what the significator, he's looked at what the significator for substance is. He's already looked at how the person, or by what means the person is going to come to it. He's looked at already when and how much the person will acquire. So he's already looked at all of these other things. And the part of fortune was primary only for finding the nature of substance, but it wasn't the only one. But here is where the only thing he looks at is the part of fortune. For what reason? Someone just put theirs in. Okay, so Leo and the sun. And the reason that you want to be kind of looking at this, Pisces and Jupiter, okay, is you want to be looking at it is because when I looked at it in my own chart, I thought, oh my God, and I'm going to give you myself as an example. So what he says is, for what reason, why do they acquire? Why? What is it that, what draws them to it? Why are they there? And I was trying to figure out, I'm like, wait a minute, didn't he already say how? You know, how is different from why? How will they make money is done a completely different way. This is why do they go towards it? Why do they go towards this thing? Having seen in those chapters which proceeded which once the native would acquire substance and by what means, we must lastly see for what reason. Why? What's the reason? And even though he might seem to want to be likened to those which have already proceeded, still it is not the same as them, but something else. See, even me, that's what I'm kind of going on about. Pisces, thank you. So one of the things that a word that comes up in every single section is this: commingling with. It's who, in almost every section, he talks about the kind of people you want to commingle with. So if it were Saturn, look, he's going to come to his money because of male or female slaves, or middle-aged or older people, or low-class people, right? Or it will be in them and in commingling with them. That comes up, that keeps coming up in every single section. So we had somebody who had Pisces. So if Jupiter, the commingling is working with noble people or people who are or priests or something. That's how they would have looked at it back then. Wait a second, bishops. So the fat cat will acquire it because of commingling with working with great men and nobles, even bishops and the like. So if you're a person who works with clients, you might find that you have important you work with important people, or you find yourself working with important people. I'm going to use my own chart as an example for a second. So I have this Virgo part of fortune and Mercury. Now I was a musician for 30 years, but I don't have Venus is music, right? And I don't really have Mercury, Venus, or anything like that. But one of the things about me as a musician is that I'm the only person around in my kind of circle of friends that are musicians who doesn't have an advanced degree. Almost every single one of them is a PhD, at least has a master's or is a PhD. Most of the people that I sang with, I was a singer, choral music. Most of the people that I sang with were singing musicians. They weren't singers, they weren't voice singers. They were people who read music very well, could read any kind of music, any rhythm. So reading, right? Remember, Mercury is reading, writing, and arithmetic. Many of them were musicologists. Ology is the science of knowledge. Ology, knowledge, right? So I kind of gravitated. This is basically what he's saying is, why do you go for the kind of thing you do? It's because you gravitate to a certain kind of milieu. And so even within music, I gravitated to this very scholastic, which is Mercury, milieu. I was known for being an extremely good reader, and even in jazz, could read music better than some of the jazz musicians. And even though I didn't play an instrument, most people think of singers as people who are not necessarily good musicians. So be thinking. So I'm just going to kind of go through them. We just looked at Jupiter commingling with working with men and nobles, bishops and the like, or other wise people. So that could be another thing, working with, because remember, Jupiter's Sanskrit term is guru, right? So this could be a person who's interested in people who are interested in working with people who have wisdom or working around wisdom. I'm interested in working around intelligence and scholasticism, even though I was always a terrible student. So another Jupiter. Interesting how many Jupiter ruled fortunes we have here. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a question then. Okay, so my part of fortune is in Pisces in the first house, but that would be ruled by Jupiter.
That's right.
So what I would look at my Jupiter, which is in the second house in Aries, and
yeah, you would look at your now here's the thing. You would also obviously look at the condition of your Jupiter. Remember, when he's talking about these, he's usually talking about when the conditions are great, right? When he says, okay, so now if Jupiter, look, and if it were in the dignities of Mars, according to the same method, he will acquire it because of, so actually he's really just saying if the part of fortune were there. So he's actually not even saying if the planet itself, he's talking about if the part of fortune were in the dignities of this planet, you're going to be attracted, you're going to gravitate towards this. Now, here's the thing. If you've got a Jupiter opposing Mars, Jupiter might not be able to bring fat cats, right? If Jupiter, once again, you have to always be looking at the local determination of the planet he's talking about, because
we're talking, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do we take into account? So I'm looking at my own chart just as an example because I'm confused about whether sort of how we evaluate this. But I have like an out of sign conjunction with my moon because it's at 29 Scorpio, but it's also co-present in the same sign but further out by degrees, like 20 degrees away from Mars.
Wait, what are you talking about? The part of fortune itself?
Yeah, like what do you count in terms of what is there?
Wait, stop. Where is the part of fortune?
It's at 4 degrees Sagittarius, and my moon's at 29 Scorpio.
There is no conjunction. We're gonna look at that. We're gonna actually look at that because when we deal with the part of fortune, we look whole sign.
Got it. And do you count co-presence then? That was the second part of my question because Mars is at 24 degrees Sag. Yes, is in the same sign, but it's really far away. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Fantastic. I'm actually, as a matter of fact, we're gonna look at some charts. You're gonna notice that all of the charts. Now, here's the thing. We do it all. This is Mercury, right? Mercury is our ruler. We do all the things. We look at the quadrant charts. We look at whole sign charts. We look at whole sign charts with the part of fortune on the ascendant. We're going to do both. We're going to look at whole sign charts and whole sign charts with the part of fortune on the ascendant. But when we do that, we look whole sign. So in this particular case, there is no conjunction between the moon and because she's not in the same sign. But yes, Mars is on the part of fortune. Yes. Got it?
Like either way, it's a Martian influence. Absolutely.
I mean, it absolutely is. And that's okay, right? I mean, that's all right. I mean, that's what it is. It is what it is, right? Isn't that what Trump said around the whole COVID thing? It is what it is. All right. So Mars. So did you say it's in Aries as well? Did you say it's in Sagittarius? So
it's
really,
yours
is in the. So you'd be looking at the Jupiterian, which we were just talking about, the great men,
totally,
etc. Yeah. But the Mars on it. See, now the planets. Remember, we're looking. Okay, thank you. You know what? Thank you. Because what you've done is you've distinguished two different traditions. So we're now in the 13th century. So we're not looking at co-presence necessarily. When we're looking at it from the Greek tradition, then we're looking at co-presence and all of those other things. What he's really just doing is he's saying, hey, if the thing that you gravitate to is going to be represented by the sign that the part of fortune is in, and if it's in the signs of this planet, you're going to gravitate to these things, which kind of makes sense. But of course, he himself and we know that how that planet is configured is going to affect this. So the difference between what sign the part of fortune is in, which is what he's talking about here, which for you would be the Jupiterian signs, and so the attraction to wisdom and that kind of thing, as opposed to the planet that's on the part of fortune, which is Mars, which will be like having Mars on the ascendant, which takes us to the Hellenistic way of using it. Do you understand?
Yes, now I do. Thank you.
Okay, so
I'm still a little confused. Like, if there's no planet there, it's just in a sign. Or we just do we want to look for the planet that's ruling that sign, and then?
Not in this particular case. Really.
I'm a little confused.
All he's saying is, excuse me, if the part of fortune is in a sign ruled by this planet, you'll gravitate towards this. That's all he's saying. So he's not taking any specific. What really got me was the word commingling. And the reason why is because, remember, the part of fortune is about the commingling between the sun and the moon. And so it brought up, as you know, things bring up questions for me. And so my question was, does the part of fortune represent that in which we commingle? And then when I looked at my own chart, I had to say, yeah, absolutely. But then again, my Mercury is in the ascendant. My ruler of the part of fortune is in the ascendant. So do you see the two differences? The one difference is my part of fortune is in the dignities of Mercury, which says that, yes, he wants to gravitate towards intelligence and scholasticism and reading and writing and those kinds of things. And then the Mercury himself is on the ascendant, is on the ascendant. So it's going to be it's going to really show up. He has the opportunity to really show up. It doesn't have it, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with what we're looking at right now. And same thing with what I was talking about with Layla. She's got the Mars on the part of fortune. If we go backwards to the 2nd century, then we know, hey, the part of fortune can be used as an ascendant. Notice how easy it is for her to not interrupt, but for her to just assert. But it's true. We have other people who aren't as straightforward about kind of hey, wait, I've got a question, blah, 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 right? And I love it, right? But that's where the Mars can on that other ascendant, this alternate ascendant kind of shows up. But that's an earlier tradition from what we're looking at the moment. Right now, all we're looking at is what signs, who rules the signs that the part of fortune is in, and how does that imply who they want to commingle with. I want to commingle with smart people. I like wise people too. Remember, Mercury and Jupiter are opposing each other from Gemini and Sagittarius. So I enjoy all kinds of important, I enjoy vidya, and so wisdom and information. So once again, if we want to get specific, then we start looking at the planet. But as far as if we just want to delve into what you might gravitate, or who, or the types of people you might gravitate towards. Does anybody here have a Mars ruled part of fortune? So part of fortune in Aries or Scorpio? Because it'd be interesting to see if they're attracted to martial artists or armies, right? Because this is what they would find themselves attracted to. Acquired because of generals or armies, bellicose men and warriors, whose delight in war. So all of the significations of the planets themselves are what they're going to find themselves gravitating towards. And I definitely found it happening in my own chart. So that's kind of my point. So Layla, here's an example. Let me know. Could you say that the Jupiter thing would be correct for you? Definitely, you like wisdom. You're interested in knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, when I'm not fucking around, sure.
Right. Okay. Okay. But that's a different thing, and maybe even from the condition of the Jupiter, we might see the fucking around.
Yeah, I mean, depending on house system, it's in the 5th or the 6th.
Right. Sure enough. Right. The 5th house is all about fucking around. Right. It's all about what we take pleasure in, and Jupiter can be a little too much. Right.
No, so, I like knowing things. I think that's valid. Yeah. Wisdom.
I mean, you're here, right? You know, so, and you not only are you here, but you even tried to get, you've even gone into the Vedic astrology room, you know, some of the Vedic astrology rooms as well. So you're interested in pursuing knowledge, and pursuing higher knowledge, right? I mean, so the Jupiter kind of knowledge is vidya, is real wisdom, whereas the Mercury knowledge, the Mercury knowledge could be the scripture itself, you know. So let's say we go to the Vedas, we go to the Bible, but then the hermeneutics of it is the Jupiter. You know, where we come. So all right, so for the sun, someone did have a Leo ruled part of fortune, I remember. So commingling with, working with kings or other princes. This could also be C-suite people, and his fortune will be in them and with them. It could also be that you're plagued by narcissists. It could also be gay men or people, you know, gay men or people in advertising or things of that nature, you know, where the look is really you know, where the gaze is really critical, right?
Could
because
also be artists, I guess.
Artist is
Could
Venus.
Artist
is Venus.
Okay.
Right. Artist, because Venus is art. Even though it's not mentioned here. Look, so dignities of Venus, according to the same method he will acquire because of women. Obviously, Venus is women, eunuchs. Likewise, effeminate men, and his fortune will be in them. So that I find that kind of interesting, even though he didn't really bring up any of the artistic. But I would say musicians and artists and things of that nature would fall under the Venusian. And we're going to actually we'll kind of come to some charts in a second. Eunuchs, all right? Emasculated, right? Emasculated men. If the part of fortune were in the dignities of Mercury, he will acquire it because of commingling with the wise and scribes and even those doing business, and his fortune will be in them and with them. The other thing is, you know, Mercury is a common to good and bad. And, you know, I've definitely, my mother used to say from the uttermost to the guttermost, you know, I definitely have had all types of people in my life as well. So also attracted to all types without any kind of, you know, without interest in strata. Which is something that, you know, that's definitely one of the things I loved about living in San Francisco was how egalitarian and how much strata hopping there was, and certainly many other places that isn't the case. And Moon, according to the aforesaid method, commingling skilled law and legal men. Isn't that interesting? And his fortune will be in them and with them and the like. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to look at. Once again, also looking at my own chart in that respect and thinking about that. Oh shit. All right. So what I thought what I would do. One second. we've been looking at Leontyne Price, and note here that her, well, first of all, Leontyne Price is one of the most beautiful voices in the world. She's a musician. Notice she's a musician. She's a singer and musician. And so note that the part of fortune is in Libra. And that the Venus is exalted in the second house, which rules the voice. Note that she's also with Mercury, who is the ruler of the voice, right? He's the ruler of the throat, of the voice. The second house rules the voice and the throat. And we've got Venus and Jupiter, both rulers of Pisces here in that. So representing some kind of exaltation in this area. So that makes that very kind of clear when we look at it from this particular way. When we look at it from this particular way, when we look at it from the, can you see the Libra rising chart now? So now we've got the Libra rising chart. And so now the chart is Libra rising, which makes even more sense, right? So the chart originally was Aquarius rising, right? With the sun near in the first house. But now we've got a Libra rising chart, which makes a lot of sense for a singer slash musician.
And so you did that by turning the chart so that the part of fortune is now the first, representing the ascendant. That's
exactly correct.
Okay.
Yeah, she's beautiful too. That's right. She's really beautiful and artistic. That's right. She's also very, very beautiful woman and extremely feminine. The voice is the essence of femininity, which is Venus. Remember, it was talking about women, that it would gravitate towards women and the feminine, it would gravitate towards the female things, or not the female things, towards the Venusian things. One of the things I remember Leontyne Price said in an interview was, she said, I only like the best fabrics on me. I can only, she was only interested in the highest quality of any kind of fabric and the very, very best of things and the best smells and the most beautiful flowers. And, so all of that Venus, that Venusian need for, that Venusian need for beauty and for pleasure and beauty. Now, isn't it interesting that these things are here now in the sixth house from the part of fortune? And we've talked about the sixth house and how I don't think it has to deal with work and all of that other stuff. But what I do think it has to deal with is duty and servitude. And remember that a friend of mine once asked me, do you make more money as a singer or as an actor? And I said, you don't make any money as either until you get to a certain point. When you're a working singer or a working actor or whatever, you go in through the same entrance that the wait staff does or the domestic staff does. And the other thing that I think about quite a bit with so many of these famous performers, especially of this era, she was performing between 1952 and 1994 or something, is how much these people worked. They worked and worked their fucking asses off all the time. And like what makes them so important and interesting is that they were able to produce at this really, really high level, working all the fucking time. And so obviously I might prefer to look at that from the actual radical natal chart, but we can also see this duty, the person's duty or their service is what we already saw was the second house of the chart. And so the voice, so the second house of the chart, so here's me overlapping this, but we can see that the second house of the chart is now the sixth, which represents their duty or servitude. And so what it is that they have to do. And now, of course, this Libra is rising. So, as I been looking at these other charts, I've been looking at them kind of in this way. I thought we would look at Ella Fitzgerald too. Because look, it's another Libra. It's another Libra. The original is Leo is the original ascendant, but look how it's another Libra part of fortune. And this time it's in the 8th house. All the stuff is in the 8th, which I think is really interesting. So now the 10th house is in the 8th. And one of the things, now this is interesting because one of the things about Ella Fitzgerald is as an African American that was doing one-nighters. So these people would basically, they would travel on a bus Oh, there's a great, oh my God, there's a great like 1 minute snippet on YouTube that shows the route that Ella Fitzgerald traveled with Chick Webb. And it basically goes from New York all over the country. Now, these people were traveling, these people were traveling sometimes 48 weeks a year or 40 weeks a year or 50 weeks a year. And often they were in conditions that were really difficult, especially if they were African American and in the South. There were no hotels where they could stay. There might not be any place where they could eat, and they had to stay in people's homes. They, you know, not being able to go in through certain entrances, the same entrances as everything. And so there's a lot of trauma connected to being on the road. I wonder if the third house is involved at all. Oh, I wonder if the third house is involved at all, says Antoine. The ascendant is Leo. The third house is Libra. So the radical third house. Let me get the actual Ella Fitzgerald chart so we can look at it.
They had a name for that circuit, didn't they? It was the cotton root, or I forget.
Are you thinking of the Chitlin circuit?
That must be it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Chitlin circuit is different. That's actually the Chitlin circuit is basically the Black Vaudeville circuit, which but this is, I mean, you would go on the road to do the Chitlin circuit. But that was basically, basically Black Vaudeville, Black performance. But this was after that. So Chitlin Circuit, I mean, there was still Chitlin Circuit as late as maybe the 60s. But this was kind of going from ballroom to ballroom, like swing. We're talking the swing era, where they'd go from the Savoy Ballroom in New York to the Alhambra in Boston. And they would, they'd perform in all of these different ballrooms all over the country.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's a little different, but similar. Same, but different, as they say. Okay, so wait, let's look at the whole sign, the regular whole sign chart. I have another question. Travel is not connected to the 8th, but trauma is. And so there was a lot of trauma connected to their travel. And the ruler of the 3rd, and so exactly. And that's what I was kind of looking at was, oh, why would that stuff be in the 8th? But there's a lot of, hard conditions, difficult conditions. Oh, growing up with traumatic travel. We know how bad things can be when you're traveling and things get bad. And so we can see that kind of thing might be happening. Now here, if we look at the regular whole sign chart, let's see if there's a connection between the 3rd house and the 8th. So the ruler of the 3rd house is short journeys and journeys by road. Right. And so not only then do we have this Venus as the ruler of the part of fortune, but the part of fortune is being on the road. And even up until she died, Ella had to get her legs cut off and everything. Even up until she died, she was traveling all the time. She was on the road all the time. Once again, she's one of these people that worked all the time. And so that's interesting. She was on the road all the time. And here we are. Here we have the road, the 3rd house. And look, the ruler of the 8th house is Jupiter. And note that the ruler of the 3rd and the 8th are in the same house. So there is a connection between, and Mercury is the ruler of roads. Right? So there is a connection between.
When you're traveling, you always end up eating food that's not that healthy too, because you're eating like whatever you can get. So I could see how that lead to diabetes and whatever.
Yes, and it did, and that's exactly how her legs got cut off. And yeah, bad food, not eating enough, eating too much, drinking too much wine. Also these cultures were, especially jazz cultures that smoked cigarettes, cultures that drank a lot of alcohol. Even though Ella Fitzgerald was not known for doing a lot of drugs or alcohol, but being in those kinds of environment, the road itself is very unhealthy. So yeah, I think that's a very good point. But so we can see that yes, there is that connection between it. And here we have the ruler of the part of fortune in the 10th. So we've even got that kind of connection. Did we have that with, what did we have with Leontyne Price? Let's see here. The ruler of the part of fortune here was in the 6th. That's right, but it was exalted. And it was exalted with Jupiter. Isn't that interesting? There's Venus, Jupiter in both of these charts. And instead, so then I wanted to look at Ted. We've been looking at Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, and of course, when we look at Ted Bundy through the lens of the whole sign, It's the same for whole sign and same for whole sign with the part of fortune on the ascendant. Remember how I've been talking about that Saturn and Leo being misanthropic and how it was on the part of fortune? Now you see why I was giving it so much attention, because the part of fortune is an ascendant. And so that's like having this Saturn and Leo on the ascendant. And note that the planet that rules Leo is applying to the Saturn. And we've got this Mars and we've got this Moon-Mars connection as well, which we also see in another serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, who's got a similar kind of MO. So Ted Bundy, we can see kind of destruction and, the other thing I thought about for these charts is, in this particular case, this person, Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, is the secret enemy to others, right? Or the secret enemy to women, especially. Well, actually not to women in Jeffrey Dahmer's chart, right? But to women in this particular chart. And so this doesn't have necessarily to do with the part of fortune, but it actually does, because the 7th house is other people, right? And then the 12th from the 7th would be other people's secret enemy. And look at how that's on both of these is on the part of fortune. And the other thing that I noticed was that in both cases, both him and Jeffrey Dahmer, who we're going to look at, there's a connection between the ruler of the first and the ruler of the 7th. So there's a connection between themselves and the other. Here the sun is applying to the Saturn, right? So the sun's the ruler of the ascendant, the Saturn is the ruler of the 7th, the sun is the ruler of the part of fortune as well, and in the 5th house of what it is that I enjoy. And note also that the Mars and the moon are there, right? So that will color some of what it is that the person enjoys. And so I just found some of these things interesting, and the fact also that the Mars Moon K2 thing over here is also what rules all of this, right? So the Jupiter is really working for the Mars, and not only that, Jupiter is now in the generosity of Mars, as Mars is in the generosity of Jupiter. And note that Jupiter is the ruler of the 8th house. In the 4th house, which is ruled by Mars, there's some secrets, right? And then we've got the sun, who's applying to the Saturn. And the fact that the moon is the ruler of the 12th. So the self-undoing is this person's anger, or this person's inability to control their anger, or something of that nature, or their hatred, right? So things of that nature would be a possible, or flexing, or constantly flexing through violence, right? Isn't
it kind of literal too? Because he confessed, like he undid himself.
Yes, that's a good point. I mean, I think what this chart really kind of shows is, as I've mentioned before, almost always when somebody says, "Why is my love life so shitty?" Venus is in Scorpio. Like I'm telling you, on Reddit, maybe 50%, 60% of the charts where they say my love life sucks, Venus is in Scorpio. And I really have come to feel that the Venus in Scorpio can have problems showing love and affection. It can show problems being able to love. Not so much the Venus in Aries, because the ardor, the heat and the ardor of passion for it can just be bossy and want to be in charge. But the Venus in Scorpio, remember that the way that Scorpio shows its aggression is through poison, right? So it finds a way to kind of poison the Venus. And I think it's something we should be looking at, in my opinion, is how Scorpio poisons, because I think it's the sting that holds the poison, right? So Venus holds the sting of the poison at this point. She gets poisoned. So something to think about. Is Jeffrey here? There he is. Retrograde, no less. Whew, yes. We've been talking about how important retrograde is. Okay, now here's Jeffrey Dahmer. Here's his regular whole sign chart. And we see it's Libra rising. Another important Libra point, but it's regular Libra rising with the Venus in the 8th, right? Which makes perfect sense. And once again, we've got, what we have here though is we've got the Mercury, whose next application is to the Mars. And the Mars is in the 7th, which, you know, can show kind of violence in relationships or anger or contention in relationships. Note also how the moon is with Mars here, or in the same, you know, co-present with Mars. So, you know, generally, the reason I'm always talking about the moon as being a co-ruler for everything is because she's how we respond to all stimulus. She's kind of what happens when, you know, someone surprises you. I use that often. You go into your house and it's a surprise party. How do you respond? That's the moon, right? You just got bad news. What do? Do you reach for a cigarette? Do you get something to eat? Do you go curl up into a ball? That's the moon. So in this particular case, and in the case of Ted Bundy, the moon, and remember what the part of fortune is, what? The ascendant of the moon. So in this particular case, the moon is reaching for how he responds to stimulus is based on Mars. And notice how in both cases, Mars is in a choleric sign with the moon, right? So it'd be different maybe if Mars were in Pisces and the moon were there, maybe he wouldn't have been interested in killing people. You know, I mean, it'd be interesting to look at other, we've only looked at 2 of them, but we've seen that retro, and it being opposed to the ascendant is bad. Yeah, yes, exactly. So the impulse, remember, the moon represents impulse and the desire nature and the appetite. Appetite, moon and Venus together, right? When moon and Venus are in the 2nd chakra, or represent what they call the Jala Tattva, or the water element, which corresponds to taste, right? So they represent appetite. So this person's appetite, I think it's because of the Mars being so connected and being co-present with the Mars, and then also the fact that the indicator for self and the ruler of the part of fortune is applying next to the Mars. So even though we've got 8th house influences going on too with the Venus, we've got this kind of bloodthirsty, we've got a kind of a bloodthirsty Mars here. And even this, we've got this instance of this Jupiter. So what did we have before? Jupiter was in Scorpio, right, with the Venus and the Mercury. Now we've got a fallen retrograde Jupiter. So mercy, remember Jupiter is mercy and compassion, right? Can this person show mercy? And note it's with Saturn as well. So showing mercy, not necessarily, maybe not necessarily. So if someone has an IMGUR link for Joe Rogan, you're welcome to put that up. And secondly, if you want to ask whatever question kind of about what we looked at, or you want to put your own chart and us look at your part of fortune, we're welcome to do that.
I'm really
sorry.
I'm really curious about how Cadent houses work with the part of fortune and rulership. Like, so say you have the part of fortune in, just from an interpretation perspective, like say you have the part of fortune in the 6th in Sagittarius with Jupiter and Venus, you know, like both the benefics are there. Like how would you look at that? Because Jupiter seemingly is in a strong place with the part of fortune, but at the same time it's in a Cadent house. And I just have a very hard time understanding cadency when it comes to rulership.
Okay.
I'm dying to know.
It's a good question. Okay, now, but since we're talking about the part of fortune, it would be different than if we just were talking about finding Jupiter. So let's get distinguished on that first. Because what I would end up doing, thank you, everybody. What I would end up doing is I would end up using the part of fortune as an ascendant. I would end up doing both traditions. Basically, what that means is Jupiter, Venus are on the ascendant, or on the other ascendant. Now, those of you who worked with me know that I consider Jupiter, Venus to mean too much of a good thing. It can often represent something that we enjoy that's gone out of control, and that and it can bring us to addiction. We've seen it in Billie Holiday's chart. We've seen it in a few other different charts where Jupiter is a lot, Venus is what we enjoy, so that's too much of a good thing. So in that particular case, that too much of a good thing could also make them sick, right? Because the 6th house is infirmities, but it's also the part of fortune. So we've got a person who really likes to enjoy things, There it is working on an alternate ascendant. But then we also have it working as a sixth house influence, which is the house of infirmity, which is a difficulty that happens because we really like to enjoy things. That's how I would look at that, if the part of fortune were there. Now, if the part of fortune isn't there, then you've got the benefics and the bad fortune. Right. Then you've got, so it's not just about cadency, it's also about what does the house itself represent, right? What does the cadent house itself represent? The ninth house is a different kind of cadency from the sixth house. But what we have in all cases is that the need to be public is not there. Right? That's what the angles are about, making it public, right? You're not in a relationship until you make it public. Right? You know how you were with you and your girlfriend or your girlfriend to be, you're talking about blah, blah, blah. Should we tell everybody we're together now? You're in high school. Oh, no. We would always say, but you're not with them until it's public. Right? That's the seventh house publicity. 10th house publicity is your reputation, what you know, the works for which you're known. Fourth house publicity is the family name. Right? With the family reputation. Some families are more invested in that than others. And obviously the publicity of the first house is I myself. Right? So so when we're looking at that, the Cadent house is the 12th house is isolated. The 9th house is in the library studying. The 6th house is in somebody's kitchen scrubbing the floor. The 3rd house is in my sister's room looking at dirty pictures. So we can think of it, so I think that's why maybe Rob Hand felt that cadency didn't necessarily show weakness. It showed different focus. Because almost every time somebody says to me, oh, I've got something in the 12th house, I say, well, find a way to make your isolation productive, because it's the joy of Saturn. Saturn is labor. If they've got something going on with the 6th house, well, you know what? Find a crusade, because find something that you hate and fight against it, because that's where the enemies are. That's also known as the house of enmity, and that's also Mars's joy. And then if it's in the 9th house, then it's like, oh, well, what's your spirituality? What are you doing about God? What kind of knowledge are you learning? Do you do astrology, or do you any kind of divination? Because that's what the 9th house is about. And if it's the 3rd, it's when did you take the last road trip, or how many brothers and sisters do you have, or whatever. You see what I'm saying? So it's not just the cadency itself, although they do put a lot of emphasis on it, don't they? They put a lot of emphasis on how it weakens. They even call it retreat, right? So basically, we do know that planets and angles really do get advanced. So if a Jupiter is in the 7th house as opposed to in the 6th house, then that Jupiter is going to show up in relationship. And so we can say that house placement is about what shows up, or to what extent the planet can show up, right? And in what context will the planet show up, right? A planet in the 7th house is going to show up when the 7th house matters show up. A planet in the 10th house is going to show up maybe all the time, right? Depending on how important 10th house things are to that person. But it will also show up in their work life and in their and in what they're known for, how they're known. And so there's also this, remember, 10th house is reputation. If you have a reputation as a slut, that's 10th house. It's not just your career. You know, if you have a reputation for being an asshole, that's 10th house too. It can be 1st house or 10th house too. But you know, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say, and so bringing it back just to like the part of fortune being there, that's kind of just like the cumulative assessment of the sun and the moon, and it being with Jupiter and Venus, it gives you a more rounded picture of those things.
Well, it does is it gives you a separate, you can now take a separate picture, because remember, I'm representing two traditions. I'm representing the first tradition, which says, hey, the part of fortune is actually another ascendant. In Vedic astrology, you never look at just the ascendant. You look at the chart from the ascendant, You look at it from the sun as the ascendant. You look at it from the moon as the ascendant. You even look at it from the Atmakataka. Akbar, Layla Akbar isn't here. There's a planet called the Atmakataka. You look at it from the position of the Atmakataka as well. And so there's different, you look at the chart from different ways to come to the same judgment. And so this is similar. You look at it from the ascendant, but then you also look at it from the part of fortune. Not only now are Jupiter and Venus in the sixth, now Jupiter and Venus are on the part of fortune, which means they have a really important message or an important influence on how you do things, what you will do. What is it? It's almost everything. It's your body and physicality. It's how much money you will make. It's how high in rank you might go. Now, let's say you've got Jupiter and Venus in Capricorn there. Then Jupiter is in fall and Venus is just kind of so-so, right? You've got Jupiter and Venus in Scorpio there. Venus is in detriment and Jupiter is just so-so. You got Jupiter and Venus in Pisces there, like Leontine. Then you're working your ass off. And you're working your ass off all the time at something that exalts you, but that you're always working, that you're always in service towards. So remember that the sixth house or rather, you're asking about cadency, period. So, and I guess my point once again is it's not just that they're cadent, it's what they particularly represent, right? Because that's going to show up. Sixth house is illness. So does that mean a liver problem or a kidney problem because Venus is there and Jupiter is there, right? So it's all the things.
Yeah, that was very illuminating. Thank you.
Who else? Anybody else? We want to go to Joe?
I mean, you just kind of answered it because the ruler of my part of fortune is in the sixth house, and it's Jupiter.
Okay, here's the thing. The sixth house is also domesticated animals. So one of the things I'm looking at with a lot of people that I'm seeing the ruler of the part of fortune there is that, hey, you might be good with animals. You might want to look at working with animals. So
interesting.
Yeah, so that's also a thing. I had a client that it happened. As a matter of fact, she had the part of fortune, the ruler of the part of fortune in the sixth, and it was bugging me. I didn't understand what the hell it meant. And as the meeting opened, she goes, "Oh, wait a minute, babies have to get off my chest." I'm like, "Oh, there it is." She had dogs and cats on her chest. She had a little menagerie, and I was like, "Oh, that's what's up." And sure enough, we were able to get there. Now, one has to figure out what it is for each person, right? It could be that one has to deal with illness or works around illness, right? Because sixth house is illnesses, right? It could be that one works in servitude to someone else, right? There is personal assistant, there's maids, people still have maids and butlers and cleaning. If you work cleaning floors, that's a sixth house job. If you work installing cable boxes, that's a sixth house job. If you're a laborer, that's a sixth house job. So just something to think about in that particular case, if you have it in the sixth. Now, here's the other thing. If you have it in the sixth, in a more germane way to what Christopher was really implying, it also means that there could be problems achieving what it is we want to achieve, right? Because sixth is bad fortune. So we don't really want to see part of fortune, the ruler of the part of fortune in the sixth. Not specifically the part of fortune, because it means any house becomes an ascendant if the part of fortune is there. But if the ruler of the part of fortune is there, it means it's harder. It's supposed to be hard for a reason. And illness could make it difficult, right? It could be that illness makes it difficult. It could be that bad luck makes it difficult, and especially the thing is, think of it, in her case, it was Saturn. And she was living in a foreign country, and she was in a state of paralysis as far as what she could do and how she could go forward. And she wanted to come back to the country. And, and so we were kind of looking at that, and I was like, whoa, dude, you're in this thing right now where you look at animals. So if you've got the part of fortune in the rule of the part of fortune in the sixth, Christopher has it too. There's a few things. If it's Jupiter, however, it can mean that you rise doing work and service. I had a really good friend who he got to a relatively high position working for goodwill. So think about that aspect of the sixth house for Jupiter is service and charity, the philanthropist aspect of him. And that there might be an aspect of moving forward with him or expanding based on the service rendered for sixth house
Makes
Jupiter.
sense.
Okay, let's look at Joe. Oops. What the? Wait, is it this? What did I? Huh. Somebody send me the.
Did it not work?
I don't. It gave me something different. Hold on one second.
Hold on, I'm gonna check it.
Yeah, I gotta check.
I'm gonna send it again just in case.
Okay. Okay, let's see this. Okay, here we are.
So the reason I brought this up was because you were talking about how like modern methods can sometimes get you one place and traditional will get you to the same place. And the first thing I noticed when I looked at this chart was that there's a yod pattern, because I have one in mind too, pointing at Saturn, involving Mars and Venus. And you're like, you know, like, I don't give a shit about that. I study traditional. Well, it's a night chart, dude.
First of all, tell me, what is a yod supposed to mean?
It's a planet, two planets that are sextile, and then both in conjunct a third planet.
So I know what it sort of. I know what it is. What it does. What is it supposed to mean? What is its function supposed to be?
It's basically saying, pay attention to this. It's important. So my point on the traditional side is that if you look at his chart, it's a night chart, right? So the biggest baddie is going to be Saturn. Look at its condition, and then look at the houses that rule it. 9 and 10, right? His belief system and what he's known for in the public are in trouble because it's Aries Saturn that's retrograde in the 12th.
Let's see here. Back. So where is the part of fortune? Let's see. So moon to. Now that doesn't. Okay. So first of all, let's see. We've got the moon and Saturn's exaltation. We've got and then we have this fucked up Mars. We've got this fucked up Mars here as well.
Well, Mars is in its domicile, right?
In his own sign, yeah. So but that can be fucked up, right? We've just talked about poison.
Yeah.
Mars and poison.
And Venus is in bad condition. That's the ruler of his ascendant, also Mars, retrograde, and its house of fall, and its sign of fall.
But here's the thing: Mars rules the poison, right? Mars also, let's see. Well, first of all, hold on a second.
Really quick, since we're using the part of fortune, shouldn't we be looking at the chart in whole sign houses?
Yeah, I mean, we can. She asked if Placidus was fine, and I said yes. I don't.
Okay.
I just didn't bother casting the chart. I googled it, and this was the. And plus, also, you can read whole sign from Placidus, but you can't really do it the other way around.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm not tripping. Okay, so it's 60. What is it? Minus back 64, back 60, back 8, back 60, back 8. So the ruler of the part of fortune is Mars, and the Saturn is on it. So that's more important, in my opinion. So that.
But either my whole point though is either way you get to the same point. Exactly. Even with the Yod theory, is that it's look at Mars, look at Saturn, look at maybe Venus.
But you wouldn't even need the Yod. You wouldn't even need the Yod because Mars is the ruler of Saturn already. And Venus is the ruler of the ascendant, and she's sextiling Mars. So you've got the Venus, and the Mars already. And also, I want to see how close the Mercury is to the Mars, because what we're really talking about is a person who likes to use incendiary speech. Yeah, so even the Mercury is applying to the square of Mars. Mars is the problem in this chart. And Mars is the problem in this chart, not the Saturn, because I mean,
I think they both are. You've said this too, though. I got it from a comment you made, Garth, on Reddit. You were saying that Saturn being in that condition is really bad, and to look at what it affects, you look at the houses.
It is really bad.
The problem.
It is a problem because it's on the part of fortune as well.
Yeah, it's not like one way's right or wrong. It's like stacking testimonies.
But see, here's the thing: you weren't really able to tell me what the yod is. All you said was, "Hey, it's important to look at it." Why? Why do we look? Why? Why do we need to look at it? What is it? What is it exactly? What does it exactly do? What is it exactly supposed to do that we're supposed to look at?
I think the idea is that the tension between the two sextile planets and the one that they in conjunct cause problems. So I think, like you said, there's a Mars-Saturn connection that's debilitatory implied with a yod.
I see. I see. So you would, but so okay. So Christopher just wrote in that aversion. What is aversion? What? Talk to me about aversion. What is aversion supposed to mean?
I mean, the way I look at it is that the two planets they're not in communication with each other whatsoever. So one might be completely aware of how the other one might be operating, and vice versa. There's no relationship. There's
no relationship. However, in this particular case, there's a very minor reception between Saturn and Mars because both in Mars's sign.
Right.
So that's another thing. That's another way in which this kinds of shows off. Now, here's not just that, but not only are they in each other's sign, but Mars is the ruler of the part of fortune, and Saturn is there. And also that puts the ruler of the part of fortune in the 8th, which is the house of fear. And what's he doing? He's a fucking fearmonger. He's basically he's fear-mongering around the vaccine. So, so I think even more so than some issue around the yod. So if it's in aversion and there's no relationship, then no relationship means no relationship. That means that there's nothing going on between them, right? If I have no somebody I have no relationship with, I don't see them, I don't come into proximity. I might come into proximity, but their proximity has no effect on mine. This is why I don't really use the in conjunct. Is because if they have
aversion is a traditional aspect. You're talking about something Hellenistic and using it to critique something modern.
It's a condition, not an aspect. I'm not talking about aversion. I'm talking about the in conjunct.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I guess my only point was either way, you get to look at the same 3 planets and you see there's a problem. I just thought that was interesting. And you see what area of his life it turns up in. That's all. I'm not saying I'm not pro yod. I'm saying that there's more than one way to get to the same answer.
So, do you see the Mars on her part of fortune? Because that's this good debate.
Yeah.
This good debate is that. So it's as if it's on your ascendant, right? It's you're not backing down. We're having a good open debate about this with nobody backing down, and that's how seriously. And that's
just because I've thought about this, and there's traditional techniques you can use to apply to it too. Like I said, Saturn is going to be his worse off planet, and if you're looking at condition, it is worse off in terms of condition.
It's worse off. Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's retrograde and it's both. But here's the thing: it's retrograde and in fall, and this guy just got $100 million and a humongous platform on Spotify. How does that work? Ruler of 9th and 10th. It's the ruler of the 10th house. How does that work? So that's kind of an interesting thing. So that's what makes me think partially we look at the ruler of the 10th is on the part of fortune. See, now when we look at it this way, the ruler of the 10th is on the part of fortune. The part of fortune is like 16 degrees of Aries. So now the ruler of the 10th is on the part of fortune. And it shows maybe the lack of moral rectitude, maybe. Person, right?
Like it shows the fame, and also like not in a good, like the infamy.
Good point. The infamy. Also, I mean, the thing is, it's been propped up. This chart shouldn't necessarily. Somebody has propped this chart up. And look, of course, somebody's propped it up. So here's the thing: this person is not self-made. This person is propped up by a fat cat. And you know how we know that? The ruler of the 10th is in the 11th. Right, so that should say no to my dreams, right? That should say that should also say that the person, that the good spirit or my patron might not be such a good person, right? That my patron might be an old person who wants to destroy things, maybe, or something like that. And look at how the ruler of the 11th, Mars, is the ruler of the part of fortune. This person has patronage. This person has malefic patronage that has pushed him up. One of the things I was reading about was how one of the Russian oligarchs put the money forward behind Spotify. And a lot of these people, you know, QAnon and a lot of these other things are psyops, and some of these people are represented, like Joe Posobiec and what's that guy, Charlie Kirk, and what's that other fucker, Ben Shapiro. A lot of these people are essentially either working for Koch or the Mercers or with Steve Bannon. You know, so there's kind of this kind of a nefarious cabal of people who are trying to destabilize geopolitics, and they have their agent provocateur. I think that this is a chart of one of these people. This is an agent provocateur that's been handpicked by a fat cat, by a great spirit.
Whoa, it's like a mouthpiece. That's crazy.
Yeah, he
I wonder who pays for his stuff. Yeah.
What's that?
I wonder who backs him.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're getting close to finding out because he's been in the thing for so long. But I'm so glad you brought this up and with everything, because yes, you're right. The yod, you can look at it via the yod, or you can look at it via the way that we would be looking at it. Either way, the Saturn is pivotal, isn't he? As is the Mars.
So is the Mars, as you said, domicile, 6th house, like it's bad. Part of fortune on it.
Right. The Mars is really everything. But the Saturn, and we see, in my opinion, looking at this chart, and we can see the blowhard too. Mercury and Leo with Jupiter, and so we can see the ideas guy, right? We can see all that shit, right? But
yeah, the Leo just showed me he's kind of full of himself.
Absolutely, but this person really, and Venus and Virgo, and look at all this shit. Venus.
What do you make of the fallen retrograde Venus then? Just out of curiosity, like what would that show you?
Well, I mean, look at the, first of all, what do we always look at when we think about love? You know, when we think about relationships and love, are you asking me in relation? Well, she's the ruler of the ascendant, first of all. So this person's not going to have an aesthetic that's typical, right? Because Venus is our aesthetic and the thing that we value, right? And so this person is going to kind of turn the value idea on head. But the other thing is that this person is interested in dominance. Scorpio, this person's interested in dominance and power, and serving dominance and power, in my opinion. How close is the Venus to the Mars? 13 to 11. So it's but she's retrograde, so she is applying. She's not just in Virgo, she's retrograde. This guy can't love anybody. He can control people. And look, the moon's in Libra.
Well, if you think of Venus as the voice, he's using a creative voice. He's in the 5th house, but
the voice is the 2nd house or Mercury.
Well, I was
right?
just thinking in terms of Venus. But being in Virgo, like he's good at putting this stuff together. He's good at the details of like pulling all this stuff together.
Yeah, definitely into the details, getting into the weeds, doing my research, and look at how Venus, does she rule the 12th as well? Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. I thought that Saturn ruled the 11th. I thought that Mars ruled the 11th. Mars rules the 12th in this chart. So the 11th house is Jupiter, who's there with, and that, look at that. That makes even more sense with that the 11th house. So look at this. Well, here, this is interesting. He does podcasts, even though the podcast.
Oh, like if you look at it whole sign? Yeah.
I'm looking at it. Well, even not whole sign, Saturn's in the 12th.
Yeah.
Even not whole sign, Saturn's in the 12th here. So, which is interesting because usually with this kind of late degrees on the sign, it'll push that. It would have pushed him into the 11th. So that's interesting. That is the joy of Saturn, right? So doing
that's he can fuck around more. Like it's not a good thing.
And about a podcast, probably before he got onto Spotify, he had the real podcast where you're isolated in some room by yourself talking to someone else.
Right.
And Mars is the ruler of the seventh. But here we've got the true fat cat, the Jupiter, and the Jupiter is with the Mercury, and so we can see that this person can make some serious money. But the infamy of the career, once again, 10th and the 12th, and it will be his self-undoing, that his public reputation could be his self-undoing. Let's see if that comes to pass. Because the ruler of the self-undoing is strong. This is interesting.
Yeah.
This is very interesting. Okay, let's move on to
And I didn't read about this story, but it's like, he's been popping lately.
Oh, he sure has. Yeah, no, and basically he's just another white supremacist ideas guy.
Yeah. I'm sorry, someone who says like don't get the vaccine at this point, I'm just sort of like, are you crazy?
Yeah, I mean, and the fact is he's vaccinated. That's the other thing. Almost all of these people that are fomenting any kind of dissent around this, almost all of them themselves are vaccinated and what's the thing? What's the other thing they said? Vaccinated and boosted even.
Boosted, yeah.
Okay, now some of you, we've talked about, like Diana, you and I've talked about your chart in relation to because isn't the rule of the part of fortune is opposed to the ruler of the second, if I'm not mistaken, in the chart. So, we've done some talking about this stuff before. Whose chart am I looking at?
Yeah, I was just trying to tie the part of fortune in with that.
So I'm looking, are you all seeing this Virgo rising chart, or is it Virgo rising? It's got sun at 1 degree of Virgo, 28, it's a 28 degree Leo, 28 degree Leo part of fortune is what I'm looking at.
That's actually, I posted my actual chart. This is the chart calculated from the part of fortune, because my rising is actually Scorpio.
Okay, I'm just noticing that now. Okay, so hold on a second. Got it. Well, let's look for just 1 second here. So this person's an artist, but what's interesting is that we're very close to Regulus. We've got that going on. So if this person's an artist, where is Venus? Is what I would be thinking. And their Venus is in Libra, in her own sign. So we have a strong Venus. She's not ruling the moon, so the moon's not necessarily working for her. She's working for this Mercury. But it looks like, so the sun and Mercury. Do you do stuff with spoken word as well, or with writing?
Not at all, no.
No. Okay, so that's interesting. That didn't show up. Okay, so who else's chart am I looking at? Oh, wait. Let's look at this one. Wait, but tell me something. When you prepare, now this is another thing I noticed. Hold on, so never mind. I was on another track. Okay, so I don't know who I'm looking at here. Oh, this might be Layla. Is this Layla? No.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. You already talked about Jupiter in the 6th, but I was just curious. I don't know if there's anything if like any of these aspects matter, or if you already sort of brought attention to it. So it could be better placed, but the sign isn't bad. Yeah, aspects to or like rulership.
Well, the fact that Jupiter, even though he's retrograde, is exalted, I think very much means that you could do best if you're working in a service-related capacity. Because here's the thing, what I was going to just mention when I was talking to Olivia is that one of the things I noticed when I started working was I'm not a very Virgoan person generally. I'm not a very organized person, or I mean I can be detail oriented when I need to be. But what I found was when I was working, I was extremely detail oriented. I made lists. I was extremely organized. I went into this Mercury, Virgoan Mercury persona. And so the persona of a late degrees Leo persona is a little bit exalted. Tell me something, Olivia. Now you don't have, you can tell me in the chat. You don't have to tell me spoken out. When you're working on something, are you hard to deal with? Or before you, like when you're in the process, when you're in your process, are you difficult to deal with? Is it better that you not be around people?
I don't know. I do like to work alone without distraction. Difficult.
But what do other people say about you when you're, like, for instance, like, you know, for instance, like I have a friend who's got a husband who's a composer, and she's like, oh shit, every time he works on something, I stay away from him. So what do other people say about you when you're working on something?
I don't know. I don't know.
Good question. Okay, so that's so the thing is, it's how you would come across when you have a task at hand for which you're going to advance yourself, right? Either that's just your job or something of that nature, right? Because the part of fortune I also call the path to fortune, right? So it's our path to fortune. So it's the persona we adopt. And in this case, so I'm looking at Layla's, and Layla's is a Jupiter Sagittarius. So it's a Sagittarian Jupiter, not a Piscean Jupiter. I think, what is it? Diana's got the Piscean Jupiter. So the Sagittarian Jupiter is the go for it, do something different, get out of your comfort zone, be different, go do something different, go do something unfamiliar, work with the unfamiliar, work with the foreign, get in, learn something completely that you never do, master an area or a location that you've never been to before. Like, that's the Sagittarian way of being Jupiter. Tell me something. When you're in a work and ordered environment, do you tend to act like that? Do you tend to? What's your work persona?
You're talking to me?
Yeah, because you've got the Sagittarian.
What am I like when I work? I guess.
Because this would be the kind of person that instead of sending an email would rather go and talk to the person.
Yes, I am that kind of person.
Because they want to get up and go, right? It's the thighs and the hips. So that's right. So it's the get up and go. This person would want to, so this person would want to work in the field instead of an office. This person would want to. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the.
Well, the last job I had, the longest I worked, was in one where I could, leave the office. I would basically buy and sell wine, but I would go and like meet the clients and pack up the wine. It was like very physical, involved, travel and movement.
Travel and movement. So and going into new areas, learning new areas, There's a really important aspect to Jupiter mastering dominions. And so Jupiter, it's like, so that's one of the reasons I think that Sagittarius is connected to travel, is because there is this element when Jupiter is in a new domain, how he familiarizes himself with it. And it becomes.
I definitely am like that with travel. I'm like a little OCD about it.
Okay. So once again, it's not, remember, it's this part of fortune is everything. It's everything in the way that the moon in a lot of ways is everything. So this is what I'm getting at with you, Olivia, when we're talking about this Leo. Leo can be prideful. Leo can need recognition. Leo can get really caught up in its concept. And so that's what I was thinking. What I was thinking is you might get a little insufferable. I'm talking to Olivia now. You might get a little insufferable when you're in process, because you would get so caught up in every aspect of the process, and how it changes you. Whatever art you would be doing would change you. You might even take on a different role with each piece that you do. You'd be, of course, it's coming from you. So, that would be, but that's kind of the issue. So we have somebody that's got the Pisces Jupiter. Christopher, where is yours? Sagittarius or Pisces? Because I thought Christopher had the Jupiter in the 6 with the Pisces.
I think he bounced, Garth.
Oh, did he? Okay. Oh, that's right. He's got a toddler, so I know he sometimes has to go. and work with this baby. So Pisces is different from Jupiter. Pisces is really about descending into the senses, the sensory, and it's the mercy, empathy aspect of Jupiter. Right? So this is the social worker Jupiter, who wants to help and fix and wants to donate and give. And so this Jupiter would be more really specific. Now, your Jupiter should be also about donation and service and charity, because it's in the 6th. Hers would be about that because Pisces is the ruler of the part of fortune. So it already would be coming from this place of finding the empathy, feeling with others, crossing boundaries so that we can feel more together, so that there can be more of a sense of togetherness, getting as close as we can possibly, coming together as deeply as we can. Do those kinds of things make sense, Diana?
Yeah, that's where I was getting a little confused, like, because my part of fortune is in Pisces, it's ruled by Jupiter, but Jupiter itself is in a totally different sign. So
it varies, right? So what you probably find is that the doorway is compassion, and then Aries is how you actually work, right? Same thing. It'll be the same thing for you, Layla. The doorway is Leo, but here, I bet you this. I bet once you figure out what it is you're going to do in this new domain, then you've found your home, you've set up, then you found your home base in that setup. And you will have created your home base in that setup, and from everything else you will do from that home base you will do everything else. And maybe you might even find a home base first before you can do the rest.
Yeah.
Diana,
are you good at starting things? Are you good at starting projects? Like energetic beginnings. You, Diana.
Oh yeah, I'm great at starting things.
Yeah, Jupiter and Aries.
But I'm wondering if the finishing though, because Pisces can be I don't want to say it's not listless. It can be directionless. It can go off on tangents and right, because it's the opposite of Virgo, which has a very specific plan and agenda, right? So it's where the flood comes and ruins our list.
I'm doing better integrating the Virgo part of my chart as I mature and get older. Yeah.
Okay.
I used to start things and then I jump to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Yeah.
See, that's a Jupiter as Pisces thing too, because it's the boredom. Mercury and Jupiter. Remember, the Mercury and Jupiter signs oppose each other, and they represent curiosity and boredom.
Well, it's exciting to start things.
Absolutely. I have similar problems, and I've got that Mercury Jupiter opposition.
I act the same way sometimes. Yeah.
Right.
Me too.
So we can maybe see then because I've got Mercury ruled part of fortune. You've got Jupiter ruled part of fortunes. And remember, they're opposite each other. So we can say maybe with those signs that the finishing of, depending on what's going on, obviously, finishing things might be an issue.
Is not great. Yeah, I always attributed that to the almost complete lack of mutability in my chart. I only have one sign that's mutable. I also have moon conjunct MC, which I've heard because the moon moves so much. I don't know if this is actually true though, Garth. Can you please fact check me that it's associated with like a lot of career changeable careers?
What is
moon
the moon
conjunct amid heaven?
Yes, well, because the moon is what's changeable, right? She's the fastest planet. So wherever she is, she's changed. That's why we don't enjoy seeing her in the second house, because it means that we're not able to often build a fortune because it's always changing. So yes, I would agree with that. Olivia says, I'm very involved and determined with my work. There's the sun, and I take a lot of pride in it. There's the sun. The pride. I like to think I can take criticism, though. We know she can't, but it can hurt, though. It hurt, of course. When she's in the midst of the process, I bet it hurts the most, especially if people aren't seeing the same vision, or generally if people don't recognize the vision. If people don't recognize the vision, I bet that hurts. That hurts probably more than criticism. If people don't recognize the vision, people don't, because the sun, once again, needs recognition. It's not always about being public, but whatever it does, it wants to be recognized for it. It must be recognized. Leo needs recognition. The sun needs recognition. Okay, so she says that also sounds true. Who's still with me here? Is it just you three? Oh, Gwen's with me too. Gwen, if you want to put your chart in, you can, or whatever. It's, you know, I think we're pretty much. Otherwise, what we can do is you can just ask me what other kinds of questions you want. Anything clearing up what we looked at today. We can go through our "What did you learn today" thing, which I always enjoy doing.